All right. Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Aaron Gutierrez, and I'm a community outreach specialist for the UC San Diego Antiviral Research Center. I've been doing outreach for over about 4 years now, promoting events in our community. And I am actually a native of the South Bay area. I went to Southwest Middle and High School. Um, we are here to discuss the COVID-19 vaccine trials that will be taking place in the area. And we want to thank the Sweetwater District for inviting us to this forum today. Before going into introductions, we want to let everyone know that we will be answering questions at the end of the presentations. You should be able to ask questions if you click on a Google link on the comments sections on the YouTube live forum. And I think I already got some questions here, so we'll try to get over all of them at the end. However, due to the time limit that we have, we might not be able to do all of them, but we'll try to get over all of them. I'm going to introduce, first of all, I'm going to introduce Paula Hall. Paula Hall has served as a board member since 2014. She represents Area 5 that encompasses the communities of Otay Mesa, Nestor, Palm City, and Imperial Beach. These areas are home to Southwest Middle and High Schools, Montgomery Middle and High Schools, as well as Mar Vista Academy and Mar Vista High School.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Aaron. It's once a Raider, always a Raider. It's quite great to see that we have real connection to our community and some success story to share today. I want to thank Dr. Ramon Hernandez, who actually connected me to the UCSD research team originally, Dr. Susan Lettle, Marvin Hanashiro, who is also a community outreach for the UCSD. Aaron, I wanted to thank you for moderating this, and our panelists today. I want to also thank you for taking the time to help us educate our community. Manny Rubio, I want to thank you for your work as our district communications director for helping us really make this forum come together. And also Desiree Don Adamo, our student rep, board representative, because she was definitely an enthusiastic supporter of this event. Dr. Aguirre, I would like you I want to thank you also for your unwavering support, and I'll hand it off to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Trustee Hall. As Trustee Hall mentioned, we appreciate the opportunity to convene this informational session for our community so they can learn more about this very important topic. As you may be aware, in the South Bay and South County, we have been very much impacted by COVID-19. And so part of that has impacted our community and it has impacted our schools. And so there's a lot of impacts all around. And that's why we look forward to being able to have information be in the community. I do want to kind of just clarify that this is not necessarily an endorsement, but we are here to provide information to our community so that they can be aware, so that they can understand, and they can have an appreciation kind of for what's going on in this specific field. So again, we appreciate the opportunity to partner with UCSD and the San Isidro Community Clinic. So with that, I will hand it back to Aaron.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Aguirre. The first presentation that we have today will be by Dr. Aldis from San Isidro Health Center. Dr. Aldis is the Clinical Director of Infectious Diseases at San Isidro Health. She received her medical degree from UCSD, completed her residency in internal medicine at the University of Colorado Hospital, and returned back to UCSD for an infectious disease fellowship. Dr. Aldis has a career focus on health disparities in historically underserved communities and serves as the director for San Isidro Health Center's HIV, tuberculosis, infectious disease, and gender-affirming medicine programs. Since March, Dr. Aldis has been directing San Isidro Health Center's COVID-19 response in providing education and engagement around COVID prevention measures, testing, and treatment. Dr. Aldis.
Thank you. Thank you, Aaron, for that kind introduction. I'm going to click on share my screen, and I may not be able to see you, so if you do need to interrupt me, I'll try to keep it brief, but go ahead and just rudely interrupt me because I can't see you, okay? So I won't take offense. So I'm going to put my slides up, and if someone could, excuse me, please confirm for me that you can see them.
Yes.
Great. Oh, actually, Aaron, I can see you as a little box, so I'll keep you in my eye. Thank you for the invitation. As Aaron mentioned, my name is Nettie Aldis. I'm an infectious disease physician, and I work at San Ysidro Health. And I have been both working in our clinical setting and also leading our COVID-19 response. And I wanted to I think most people are probably familiar with us, but I wanted to give a brief introduction to our health center. We are long-term partners with you in the community. We just celebrated our 50th anniversary recently, last year. We have roots in San Ysidro, of course. This is a picture of our first clinic in the neighborhood and one of our founding mothers at our anniversary celebration. We have grown over the years, grown with the community. We now serve about 100,000 patients. We have multiple clinic sites, and we've spread throughout the region. And we serve a diverse and historically underserved communities, as well as many low-income families. So when COVID came, as all of you remember, it was a shock to everyone, and we had to really respond quickly. Because we are a health center, we had to be open, and because of our connections to the community, we really looked to see what kind of response was going to be needed. And of course, we also unfortunately very early on learned that our community was going to be hit hardest. So we started providing telehealth and opened a Healthline for access for patients who wanted to stay home. People were very concerned about their health and wanted a phone number to call. We quickly switched to a whole bunch of protocols that all of you are now familiar with in your homes as well, right? This is a picture of our wonderful staff in Chula Vista with their masks on and really learning how to do healthcare in this new environment, just like all of you are learning how to live your lives with these new precautions. We remained open. This is a picture of one of my favorite San Ysidro Health doctors, Dr. Roberts. She's in National City, and we remained open for care and for emergency dental. And then, of course, really partnered in the community. This is a picture of food distribution and really tried to figure out how we could play a role in the community response as well. And one of the things, one of those areas is education. I'm going to talk to you about that today. And of course, we opened up testing sites to make sure that we could ensure good access to testing in the South Bay region, which, as you recall in the beginning, was really a challenge. And one of the ways that we've grown to serve that community need that I touched on the last slide is through a new partnership in creating the San Diego Latino Health Coalition, which is a partnership of a number of local community health organizations and the County of San Diego, with the goal of reducing COVID in Latino communities that have been the hardest hit. So we have, through that partnership, there's a lot of great services. I put some resources there for you, and those will be included at the end as well. But we have these new COVID resource centers, and really recognizing that COVID is not just healthcare, but there's a social aspect and there's an economic aspect to it, and all of those impact the overall health of the community. So we have, of course, access to the doctor and if you need testing, but also things like information about the financial assistance programs, food and housing programs, COVID prevention kits that can come to your house, and also things like what does it mean what's a contact tracer, what does quarantine mean, and things like that that are impacting a lot of people in the community. Addition, as I mentioned, part of our mission is really to provide that community aspect of our care, not just the healthcare, but what else is needed for the whole family and the whole patient. And so we've had a longstanding research and health promotion department at San Ysidro Health. And that has really been to take the idea of clinical research or any kind of research activity and bring it into our communities and have it really be a participation of the community. And so our Research and Health Promotion Department, which is led by Dr. Fatima Munoz, has really been engaged with many communities, but also primarily with the Latino community in the South Bay, in engaging in clinical research and in engaging the community in studies. And so we recognized that research was going to start coming to our neighborhoods as the rates in the South Bay were higher. And so we wanted to be prepared for that. And so we have tried to provide a resource to be reliable information that our patients can use to make their own decisions about participation in research, including, for example, today in thinking about participation in vaccine trials and what does that mean. And so we have a designated phone line and education contact for people to ask those kinds of questions. I'm going to do this briefly because I think we all have learned by now what is COVID-19. It's a respiratory virus caused by the novel coronavirus SARS-CoV-2. And of course, there's a lot of factors involved in risk to exposure, but really anyone can get COVID-19. But what we have found is that while anyone can get COVID-19, certain groups of people are more at risk for getting sick from COVID-19. It's definitely older adults and people with chronic medical conditions. And bringing it home to San Diego, I just want to give us, these are the numbers, I think from today. I kind of double checked to get them up to date. And so you can see that we're hitting these unfortunate milestones of over 45,000 cases in San Diego County. And if you look at this, the cases and the deaths, we've had 776 deaths in our community. And I'll show you a little more on that in a minute. But one thing you want to look at is the age. So the median age, right? So half the people are older, half the people are younger than that number. And the cases are among young people, but the deaths are among older people. And that really relates to that last slide I showed you. And then I think most of us lived through this. This is a timeline here of the last 6 months. And you can see while we were all really sheltering in place in March and April and May, the rates were pretty low, but the number of cases really shot up over the summer as people came out and we loosened our restrictions. And now we're kind of going along, and it's hard to say what this number is going to be because it's incomplete. So we're hoping that it's going to go down, but unclear. And I want to point this out because we're talking to a high school district, right? Young people are really important right now. It's really important to educate young people about COVID because they are driving the pandemic right now. So I'm not sure. Can you see my mouse, Aaron? Yes.
I'm still here. Yes.
Okay, good. So I'm just using it as a pointer here. So right here, this tall bar is cases among young people. So that's really driving our pandemic right now. And I think especially for the South Bay, where there's been such a disproportionate impact in cases, in deaths, in economic impact, we've really got to get our young people behind this as a social justice cause and get them on board of saying, you know, I'm going to do those 4 things to prevent COVID, right? I'm going to use my mask. I'm going to keep my distance. I'm going to wash hands and stay home when sick. And really, the mask and distance are things that if we can get the power of young people behind those activities and saying, you know, I'm going to always keep my distance and always wear my mask, I think the young people can lead us to a better place in this pandemic and pull our numbers down. But we've got to engage them, and you can see why. Oops, that's there twice. I also want to let you know, I don't think it's a surprise to anyone on this call, of course, that the South Bay has really been disproportionately impacted. And you can see that in any one of a number of pictures that you've unfortunately seen on the news over the past few months. And COVID is also really teaching us a stark lesson about health disparities, which is something that I think probably your high schoolers and people in the community have been learning about, and I hope we'll start to pay more attention to. And so, you know, a health disparity is when one population experiences a negative health outcome compared to other populations, usually due to demographic factors such as race and ethnicity, as well as zip code. And so in San Diego, what you see here is that Latinos are very disproportionately impacted by COVID. This is the health disparity of COVID in San Diego. Latinos are 34% of the population, but 62% of the cases of COVID and 48% of the COVID deaths. So this is really this is why there was the the creation of the South Bay Latino Health Coalition is really to target this and bring these numbers down. So I would like to just close with presenting us with something to think about during this conversation for the next hour about how are we as a community going to fight the pandemic and win. And that's really the we can be we as a country, we as a community, we in the South Bay. How are we going to fight this and be effective? I already mentioned the universal use of the COVID prevention measures. We have to do them. It can't be, I'm tired, I don't feel like it, I don't want to be distanced. It's really pretty simple, right? Mask, distance, wash your hands, stay home when you're sick. It's simple, but it's not easy because it requires us to be motivated and to do it constantly, and to think about things like gatherings and parties and groups of friends and family gatherings, and how can we do those things carefully while keeping those 4 precautions in place and really engaging young people in getting those precautions in place. Obviously, we need testing, although if we can do the first thing, we'll have a lot fewer cases. We won't have as much testing to do, but testing is also really important. And that's why it's important to have a medical home right now. We find that some of our patients, they come in sick and they didn't have a doctor before. And so we want to remind people in the community to have a medical home so that if you do get sick or get symptoms or have questions or have an exposure, that you have someone to call to get a test. Like I mentioned, we've set up our health line. There's also multiple county sites. Our county has been very responsive to ensuring open access to testing, and there's a number of public access sites for free testing in the county. You can just go to the county website. For treatment, the main treatment is to have a doctor so that we can support you while you're sick and make sure your oxygen is okay, talk to you about when you might need to go to the hospital. There are some new treatments for patients in the hospital, and there's some studies of new treatments. So you may start to hear about studies of new treatments for outpatient as well. And that's, again, something we want to help educate people about when they start to hear these things coming into their communities. And then, of course, vaccines is the topic for today. We're going to need that to help us return to normal life, in addition to all these other things I'm mentioning. And what I really want to make sure that we're thinking about is that we need a vaccine that works for everyone, that works for the people most impacted by COVID. And when we do get a vaccine, we need to lobby and fight to make sure that it is distributed to the communities most impacted. And so both of those are being discussed quite a bit. And those of us who are involved in this topic are really working to make sure that our patients and our communities are represented in opportunities for research and participating in the vaccine, and that there will be equitable distribution of the vaccines when they come out. And I'm going to close there. These are some resources that will be in the slides that are saved in the presentation. And I just want to thank you for your time, and I'm going to hand it back over to Dr. Promer. Thank you. And let me see if I can figure out how to stop sharing my screen. Did it work, Aaron?
Yes. Yes, we're back in the screen. All right, so now Dr. Promer will be talking to us about the clinical trials. Dr. Promer is an infectious diseases specialist and HIV primary care physician practicing at UC San Diego Health and Palomar Medical Center. She also works as the sub-investigator on the AstraZeneca and Johnson COVID-19 vaccine trials. So, Dr. Promer?
Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see. Well, not your screen. I'm sorry. No.
I think there's something wrong with my settings. Did you get my PowerPoint? Sorry about this. That I emailed to you?
Should be here. Let me see.
Sorry about the technical glitch, everybody. I have a new computer that I just set up, so I think all the settings aren't in place. But just to introduce myself, like Aaron said, I'm a sub-investigator on multiple COVID-19 vaccine trials through San Diego.
Let me know if you could see my screen.
Perfect. If you could just start presentation mode, and I'll let you know when to advance. I just don't want to play around with things too much and cause a delay. Okay. All right, so as you all know, this is an unprecedented need, which requires an unprecedented response. Next slide. So I'd just like to start by explaining who we are a part of. We're part of the COVID-19 Prevention Network. Next slide. And you may have heard of Operation Warp Speed in the news. It's a partnership between the Department of Health and Human Services and the Department of Defense. Its goal is to accelerate the development, manufacturing, distribution of COVID-19 vaccines, therapeutics, and diagnostics. And the COVID-19 Prevention Network, of which we're a part of, is a functional unit of Operation Warp Speed. Its mission is to conduct phase 3 efficacy trials for COVID-19 vaccines and monoclonal antibodies. Next slide. And you can actually find more information about the National COVID-19 Network by visiting this public page, www.coronaviruspreventionnetwork.org. And it has a lot of great resources that you can read, reliable resources about the science behind the various studies, which studies are available, and even how to sign up to be part of a registry. Next slide. And so now to focus on our COVID-19 vaccine strategy. Next slide. Our strategy is to follow the typical FDA process. I know we have a name of Operation Warp Speed, but that means that the timeline is shortened, but we still go through all the steps required to license and get an FDA license for a vaccine. In phase 1, typically includes 20 to 100 healthy volunteers, getting some initial information about, is this vaccine safe in humans? Does it seem to work? And then with good enough results, then a vaccine candidate can progress on to phase 2, involving several hundred volunteers, seeing more information about what are the most common side effects and how do volunteers' immune systems respond to the vaccine. And then with good enough results, you can then progress on to phase 3, involving hundreds or thousands of volunteers, or in the case of our studies, tens of thousands of volunteers. Really looking to see, how do people that get the vaccine compare to those that don't? Is it safe? Is it effective? And only if you get good enough results from this stepwise process do you get a licensed vaccine. And so I just want to emphasize that although we are operating in a faster timeline, it's through this organization and the COVID Prevention Network that we're able to operate at a faster timeline but not compromise any of these individual steps. Next slide. And so our main questions in these studies is the study vaccine safe to give to people? And can the study vaccine reduce the severity and frequency of COVID-19 illness? Next slide. And so now I'll be focusing on AstraZeneca and Janssen trials. Next slide. The eligibility criteria for both these trials is about the same, so I'll just lump them together. We're looking for people that are over or at least 18 years of age, healthy or have a medically stable underlying condition, meaning you can have diabetes, high blood pressure, but as long as you're seeing a doctor for that and on medication, we'd be happy to include you, and have some sort of increased risk for SARS-CoV-2 exposure and COVID-19 illness. That means, you know, our ideal participant wouldn't be someone that lives alone, stays to themselves, just works from home, because that means that they have a very, very low risk of exposure. A risk of higher exposure would be someone who's out in the community through their job, such as an essential worker, someone in a restaurant, someone working in the grocery store, healthcare industry, or living in a household with someone who may be exposed as well. And some exclusionary criteria at this stage of our studies is history of laboratory confirmed COVID-19 in the past, people that have weakened immune systems, but this does not apply to people who have HIV that are on treatment, and women that are pregnant and breastfeeding. Next slide. So now for the AstraZeneca study, it's a phase 3 randomized placebo-controlled trial. The vaccine works based on a weakened version of a common cold virus called adenovirus, but it's changed so that it cannot replicate inside your body, and so it cannot cause infection. It works by presenting a part of the spike protein to teach the body to fight against the virus. And this is a little cartoon of the virus in case you haven't heard about the spike protein. It's the orange golf tee looking part of it. And it's important to allow the virus to enter into host cells. And so it's an important part of infection. And so the idea is that, you know, by learning how to block this spike protein, you're teaching the body to fight against the virus. And the injection schedule is 2 injections, 4 weeks apart. And for every 2 people that get the vaccine, 1 person gets placebo. And it's really important to include a placebo group to make sure that the vaccine works better than getting no vaccine at all. And you may have heard in the news that the AstraZeneca trial is currently on pause. And we still are on pause at this time. This is to allow for the FDA to review current safety data to make sure it's safe to restart. So I just want to emphasize, any information we get, we analyze it before, you know, restarting the trial. Next slide. Next up is Janssen. This is the study that we plan to have in National City. It's a phase 3 randomized placebo-controlled trial. A lot of similarities to AstraZeneca, so I just highlighted the differences. Rather than presenting part of the spike protein, it presents part of the genetic material copied from the spike protein, from the virus, so that the body can generate this protein that teach the body to fight against the virus. Its injection schedule is just 1 single injection, and for every person that gets the study vaccine, 1 person gets placebo. Next slide. Now, what are we doing for outreach and recruitment? Next slide. Well, we're using traditional methods like the poster that you see here. Next slide. But we also have a COVID Prevention Network website specific to San Diego. It's pretty easy to remember if you want to visit it for more information. It's covidvaccinesd.com. And like the national website, we have a way to join the study and be part of the registry, just so that people from the study know that you want to be contacted to learn more. Next slide. And kind of reinforcing what Dr. Aldos had alluded to, there are some really hard-hit areas in San Diego with regards to COVID-19, and I've highlighted the top 5 zip codes from the San Diego County websites. And as you can see, out of 100+ zip codes, the national city zip code is actually number 5, so quite high up there, and some surrounding zip codes of interest as well. Next slide. Yeah. Oh, there we go. And so what are we doing to do this? Rather than expecting everybody to come to UCSD campuses in Hillcrest and La Jolla, we from UCSD, using the infrastructure of the Antiviral Research Center, are putting together mobile research units to take the study to the communities that are hardest hit by COVID-19, really to increase access. And so we will be in Chula Vista, Imperial Beach, La Mesa, and of course, National City. And this is a picture of our converted bus that we use as part of the vaccine trial. Next slide. And as Dr. Aldos also alluded to, the Hispanic community in particular in San Diego has been very hard hit by COVID-19. And so we want to keep this in mind as far as representation in the various trials with regard to COVID-19, including vaccine trials. Next slide. Unfortunately, one weakness of a lot of research studies is that they don't really represent the general population. And so one of our goals is to really represent the general population of San Diego and the population that is affected by COVID-19. Right now, we are not doing a great job of this, and so that's why we're reaching out to communities like you that can help us. And here is a breakdown of the racial and ethnic diversity of our current San Diego registry. As you can see, only 13% identify as Hispanic or Latino, and we think there is much room for improvement with regards to this. Unfortunately, very little of our registry at this point represents subpopulations of color. Next slide. So what are we doing to address the lack of diversity in clinical trials, specifically our own? We are working hard to address language barriers. Many of our study personnel are fluent in both English and Spanish. The website is both in English and Spanish. We're doing media outreach in Spanish as well. And all the study materials, including the full informed consent, are all in Spanish. We are trying our best to address geographic barriers by going out to the communities that we want to include, that we want to give access to. We are working hard to address longstanding medical distrust and longstanding distrust in research among these vulnerable communities by providing thorough information on the study, allowing for lots of questions, continuing to emphasize that participation is voluntary and that voluntary participants can withdraw at any time. Next slide. And so you may ask, what will we do about vaccine distribution once we find one? Next slide. So, so understandably, underserved communities have expressed mistrust of the vaccine effort. Advance. Next slide. And if limited vaccine is available, the COVID prevention network that we are a part of will establish recommendations for priority populations that should receive vaccines first. Next slide. And so we fully understand that we need to start organizing now to guarantee that the communities we're asking to participate now are not later left behind. We certainly don't want to feel like the communities feel like we're just using them for the research. We want to improve access as part of the study too. Next slide. And this is just a graphic from this document that as in conjunction with the COVID Prevention Network, illustrating recommendations for a stepwise fashion, you know, who's at highest priority to get those vaccines first. You know, first responders, healthcare workers, essential workers, people who are at risk. So we don't want it to depend on geographic location or, you know, monetary status. We really want to give it to people who need it. Next slide. And so I kind of rushed through that so we would have enough time for questions. I think I'll turn it back to Aaron.
Let's see. All right. Am I back on the screen or? Yeah, okay. All right, so we have a few questions. So I'm gonna try to go in order. There's not that many, but let's start with the first one. So the first one would be, well, it's actually a few questions in one. So its COVID rates are dropping. Shouldn't focus be placed on building a healthy lifestyle and promoting overall wellness in the South Bay, opposed to the focus on a vaccine that comes with huge risks? Another question in it would be, who will be providing clear and detailed information consent to include the ingredients and potential side effects like Guillain-Barré and transverse myelitis, which can be permanently debilitating? Finally, who will be the responsible party when an adverse reaction occurs? Would it be UCSD or would it be AstraZeneca?
So I think I'll let Dr. Aldos answer the question about addressing underlying risk factors, because I think she'll answer that best.
Okay.
That's great, and then I'll throw the research questions to Dr. Promer. I think my last slide that I presented, where I said, here's this whole package, right? So if we're going to fight COVID and win, we cannot put all our eggs in one basket. So you're correct in thinking, you know, do we need to think only about a vaccine? Absolutely not. We have to do all of it, and we can do all of it, and we are, right? So we have to focus on those prevention measures that I mentioned, those big 4, which I'm going to say 10 times more before the end of the call, right? Wash your hands, distance, wear your mask, and stay home when sick. We have to do that. And when we do that, it works. So that's a critical part of the response. We can't just wait around for a vaccine. We have to have testing in our county and our communities, and have really worked to make sure that when people need a test, they can get it. And that third bullet point that I had was healthcare, right? And that is really going to your point of saying, where should we put our energy? We have to put our energy into all of it. And in healthcare, that means making sure people have a medical home, making sure that they have access to treatment. It is true that we would like to work on all of those underlying health disparities that put certain populations at risk. But at the same time, right now, in addition to working to prevent and improve on all of those other underlying health disparities and health conditions, which is going to take some time, but that's our life's work at St. Isidro Health. Right now, we also need to make sure that people have the care they need for COVID-19 right now. And that is going to have to include a vaccine, as well as all the things that we mentioned and all the healthcare. So it's a tall order. We can do it. We have all of the resources at our hands to do it. And the last thing I'm going to say, which I'm going to throw to Dr. Promer, you mentioned, shouldn't we focus on healthcare instead of a risky vaccine? And so that makes me think you have some concerns about vaccine safety. And because I am an infectious disease doctor and have seen the great benefits to society of vaccines, I just want to remind everybody that vaccines are, in general, incredibly safe and have saved countless lives over generations. So we need to remember that they're an important part of a health response to an infection. And again, I'd like to see us do items 1 through 4 and the vaccine. And I'm going to throw it to Dr. Promer for the vaccine question.
Oh, sure. I think the question to Guillain-Barré and transverse myelitis was referring to the AstraZeneca pause, which I kind of flew over quickly for the sake of time. But yes, the AstraZeneca study is currently paused so that the US FDA can independently evaluate this case of transverse myelitis that occurred in a participant in Europe, that, seeing, is it associated with the vaccine? Was there another cause? And evaluating to see, if we should restart here. So I just want to emphasize that there's a lot of checks and balances, weighing, do the benefits of the vaccine outweigh the risks? Because we don't want to push out something onto market before we have these questions answered. And one nice thing about participating in the trial is we're keeping a very close eye on you. And if you do have a serious reaction that's due to the vaccine, then yes, the trial would cover that. But of course, if you get, another illness or hospitalized for another reason, the trial would just be focusing on, what is the result of the vaccine. And then as far as explaining, all the ingredients and that sort of, and all the information to the participants, the consent form is quite long, and we give the participants the time to review it. We actually send it, we're planning to send it off beforehand so people can take time to read through it and ask questions where they are concerned. And if there's at any point that they say, this is too much, then they can stop. And we're always available to answer questions. We have a large team that goes through the consent form with participants. And if there's ever a question that that team member doesn't know, they know to defer up to someone higher to answer the question adequately. We certainly don't want to rush anybody through it or make anybody feel uncomfortable.
I just wanted to add one thing I agree with, of course, everything that Dr. Promer said, and that's one of the reasons that, the studies have also sort of wanted communities to learn about the vaccine trial before they decide to participate. And that's one thing that we're trying to do with these kinds of talks, is to have people get the information, right? So they can decide for themselves in an informed way. And so that when they arrive at the study, they've thought it through, and then they really go through the informed consent, and they know what that means to have informed consent. So that's one of our goals as well, is education. And then I just wanted to mention, as somebody who is not affiliated with the vaccine studies, that many of us were actually very reassured when we saw that the AstraZeneca trial was held to review something. If you do a study of, tens of thousands of people, someone's going to get sick from something during the study. That's very common. And then you stop and take a look and see if they got sick from the study or just they were going to get sick anyway. But kind of like Dr. Promer said about that the steps are not being skipped, it was reassuring to those of us in the community to look and say, oh, you know what, when they saw something, they stopped. That means they're following the usual protocols. They're not warp speeding past the usual protocols. And so that was a good test for some of us to say, okay, they're actually following the rules of clinical trials that we would expect them to follow. So that was helpful to see.
I don't hear you, Aaron. I think you're muted.
Sorry, I was on mute. All right, so next question. Why so much emphasis on vaccine when the numbers and data are showing a constant decline? Why not put more resources into helping build these communities' overall health and wellness with improved exercise and diet to avoid comorbid issues that add to COVID?
Aaron, I'll jump in because I think I answered that one last time about how we have to do all of it. I also do want to say that rates are not really going down. We were very close to moving into the purple zone recently. What that means is that more businesses would close, more jobs would be lost, and that is bad for the overall health of the economy, of the community. So I would say that the idea that it's going away, that is not the case. The graph that I showed where things were kind of flat and then they spiked real high in July, we had a little correction from that, but that was by closing more things down. So we are not out of the woods yet. And when you see the graph, it looks like maybe it's going down. That's because they haven't reported the cases from that week yet. So it's very important for us to recognize that this is not going away. We have to face it. We have to take care of it using those big four that I will spare you, but I've mentioned in that slide, you have to do all of those things. We're not going to be able to get out of this without doing those interventions. And if we put those on hold, then focus on something that I already showed you on those last slides, those are the people who are going to be most. And when the rates go up and businesses close, more families are impacted. So that's why we have to do all of it. We have to keep focusing on preventing it, on testing for it, on treating it, and on developing a vaccine for it, in addition to working on the health of our communities, as you pointed out.
All right, so next question would be, what goes into being in a clinical trial? Is there compensation for this? Is there additional medical treatment provided to the patients?
That's a great question. So we understand that taking part in this clinical trial requires a lot of time and transportation, a little bit of transportation back and forth, although we hope to make that a little bit more convenient for you. So we do compensate you over the course of the trial. Longer study visits are more money, and then you get money as you complete certain milestones throughout the study. The entire study lasts 2 years, but most of the work is kind of upfront, where we go through all the consent, we take blood samples, screen you for COVID. So that first study visit can last maybe up to 2 or 3 hours, but the visits after that should be shorter. And the question is, do we treat illness? So as part of the study, of course, we're monitoring our patients for signs of COVID and testing them as well. And we're characterizing how severe their symptoms are and kind of plugging them back into their primary care physician or sending them to the emergency department when it's appropriate.
Dr. Promer, I think also there's some home monitoring that's kind of interesting. I think maybe you're watching patients, so like if they do get sick, a little bit more closely.
Oh, definitely. Well, I'll talk in particular about the AstraZeneca trial. You have kind of a cuff that you use, and it can monitor your oxygen saturation, blood pressure, heart rate. And so a lot of times it can be quite expensive for someone to pay for that at home, but we use that to monitor patients with COVID-19. And so then we'll get an early signal that'll go to a phone. So we know to say, look, your oxygen is really low. You need to go see a doctor. You need to go to the emergency department.
All right. So next question. This says that the trials are for adults. What is there available for younger people, teens, and children?
Well, yes, it's a lot of times we want to get data in adults before we go to other populations, such as children or pregnant women. So what is there for teens? Well, the people that they live with certainly can participate in the study because the people they live with are at more exposure because teens that are going out and about may have a higher risk for COVID. So I would say at this point, they can encourage their elders to participate.
I'm going to just take this moment to plug the pitch to reach out to the teenagers to participate in the COVID prevention through those 4 prevention intervention measures, right? So the young people can't get involved in the vaccine trials, which is fair because we want to know that the vaccine works in the populations most impacted and people with underlying health conditions or older people. But I would say that if young people want to be involved with COVID, they should take up leadership in really helping get our rates down through those COVID prevention measures we talked about. And I'm hoping they'll be inspired to do so.
Well, and then themselves not smoking, staying generally healthy too. But, so.
All right. Next question would be, what about the lasting effects from COVID? Will the vaccine address those?
Will vaccine
address the lasting effects of, well, I'm not sure if this is worded correctly.
Well, I think we can touch on both. There are some long-lasting effects of COVID-19, and this is one of the important things for people to know. Although most people who get COVID will recover, there are young people who get COVID and develop long-term heart problems. There are other people who develop longer-term lung problems. So maybe the question is touching on those longer-term complications. From our perspective in the prevention side, that's a reason for us to do all the preventive measures possible, including the non-vaccine ones and the vaccine ones to prevent COVID-19. So that's a motivator to prevent it. I'm not sure if there's anything with the vaccine trials, Dr. Promer, as far as following people out to see if they have any complications.
So we do follow people for 2 years. If we were to have an unexpected finding where patients that get the vaccine do worse, we would of course stop the trial at that point and say it's not a good vaccine, but we expect people that get the vaccine to do better.
Okay. And it looks like this is the last question. There was a few other, but I think they've been answered in the questions that already were answered previously. So the last one is, what about those who show no symptoms but are actually infected? How will trials impact those spreading?
As part of the trial, we are screening people at the beginning. So it's possible that someone would come, want to get the vaccine, and they're actually infected. If we do get that positive result back, then we can contribute to the public health effort and, for contact tracing. And so the people they're in contact with could get tested too, and they would know to self-isolate.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll say that I think that knowing that there are asymptomatic cases, which is brought up in this question, that's one of the reasons to do all of the measures, and also one of the reasons why one of the interventions we're going to need is going to be a vaccine, right? Because I need to be protected when if my family has all received our COVID vaccine and we bump into somebody with COVID who doesn't know it because they don't have symptoms, that's the opportunity for the vaccine to help protect us. So until that day, we're going to use our other prevention measures, our masks, our distancing, our hand washing, et cetera. But when we get a vaccine, it will allow us to recognize, okay, there are asymptomatic people out there, but if we've all had our vaccines, it reduces that asymptomatic spread because they can't pass it to me because I've had my vaccine. So that's one of the reasons why we really, really need vaccine help to get us out of this mess.
So that's actually all the questions that we have for today. I'm not sure if you want to add something else. No. All right, so Paula, do you want to add some comments, closing statements?
I just want to thank the panelists, Dr. Aldous and Dr.
Promer.
I'm sorry. I couldn't remember it off the top of my head. I wanted to thank you both because it is very important for our community to be educated and to have the information, because that is empowering, and we need to empower our community. Dr. Aguirre?
Thank you, Trustee Hall. Exactly where my thoughts are, exactly where you were at. Our community has been disproportionately affected, and because of that, we want to make sure that there's that information. Some of the slides and the information that was presented was pretty stark in terms of how we're being impacted in the South Bay. Also, the disproportionate impact in some of our ethnic communities, like the Latino community, and to another degree, the African American community and the Filipino American community. So we are a very diverse community in the South Bay, and I think the more we can provide information and opportunities for all of our stakeholders to be able to have that information so that they can make informed decisions, I think is us providing a public service, and that's what we are meant to do. We will, just as an FYI, we will place this conversation, this public forum on our website so that if somebody wants to access it at a later point in time, it will be available because it's very important information. It's very timely information, and it's critical, especially for us in the South Bay. So we appreciate the opportunity to convene and partner to share public information.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.